Are you running your business or is it running you? Working a full-time job and managing your short-term rental can be really difficult, especially if you're doing everything yourself.
Yeah, I think everybody comes into this trying to become self-employed with the right intentions, that they want more control over their time. And like you said, Rory, it can quickly swallow you, especially in short-term rentals where it's really a 24/7 game.
Let's ask yourself one simple question. What's your goal?
I think it's being able to focus and just take one step in front of the other. I mean, it started back when I was working a W-2 job, had a kid. Like, there could be COVID was going on. There could be so many excuses, but with a very strong why, strong desire, taking one step in front of the other, was able to kind of build this business up.
In just 5 years, Chris Petzy went from corporate employee to, these are my words, silent assassin in the short-term rental space. How did he do it?
You hear so much about real estate and the powers that be, and its ability to create cash flow. That was really the only intent at that point, was to create another revenue stream that wasn't dependent on an employer.
My name is Jason Muth. I'm a 29-time Airbnb superhost. I worked in the media business for over 25 years for big corporations. And in 2016, when we bought our first vacation home, we welcomed our first guest. Now, that's what we do full time. Ever since then, we've welcomed over 5,000 guests and all of their dogs and furry companions into our homes. And we've had an awful lot of fun doing it. And now we're here to show you how to create a smart stay. On with the show. Chris Petzy, I can't believe we finally got you on this podcast. You are such an incredibly busy guy, and we're so grateful to have you here today. Let me just tell everybody a touch about how Chris and I, our orbits crossed, like Venn diagrams. Like, we intersected once in Dover, New Hampshire, when I saw you speak at a short-term rental meetup. And next thing you know, it's been over 2 years of me learning from you in the STR Secrets Mastermind coaching program, and we've shared lots of cocktails together at a number of conferences and meetups, and I consider you a friend at this point, and we're grateful to have you here speak with us today on Smart Stay Show.
Yeah, really, I appreciate the opportunity. Those are very kind words, and it's been great getting to know you, Jason, as a student, but then also as a peer, and then Rory, I've seen you a couple times at meetups, so just excited to be chatting with you guys this morning.
Yeah, we're going to really dig into what Chris brings to this industry in short-term rentals, whether you have one property, no properties, 100 properties. Like, this guy is just this silent assassin in this space. And I've got to jump in and say, what is your superpower that sets you apart from some of your peers?
I think it's being able to focus and just take one step in front of the other. I mean, it started back when I was working a W-2 job, had a kid. Like, there could be COVID was going on. There could be so many excuses, but with a very strong why, strong desire, taking one step in front of the other, was able to kind of build this business up. And then now that it's full time, and what's interesting, you've kind of gone through this yourself. You have all this time in the world, and now it's even harder to focus because you have all this blank space on your calendar. And I think I do a really good job of filling it with intention and with the things that I want to be focusing on and living my life by design and not by other people's agendas.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing a lot from you and the other coaches in Short-Term Rental Secrets, to start with that why. You even said it to me a couple weeks ago when I was talking about a situation with an owner, and I'll share that story either off camera or on, but you're like, what am I going to ask you? And I'm like, I don't know what you're going to ask me. And you're like, start with the why, find out, what's your goal? You always say, what's your goal? And I have to kind of put that in the back of my head. What's your goal? You launched in short-term rentals. What year was it? 2019. 2019. What was your goal back then?
I mean, at the time, it was to get out of my W-2, to leave my job and create more control for myself and my family. And, you hear so much about real estate and the powers that be, and its ability to create cash flow. That was really the only intent at that point, was to create another revenue stream that wasn't dependent on an employer.
Yeah.
I know, a lot of
today.
A lot
Go
of
ahead, Rory.
self-employed people and people who started their own businesses, they do it to gain some sense of control of their lives, and often it backfires and actually, takes away some of the control.
Mhm.
Could you give any people in that situation some advice on how to control your time, how to, keep those goals that you set for yourself at the forefront, instead of having them, slip behind, take the back burner to the day-to-day crises?
Yeah, I think everybody comes into this trying to become self-employed with the right intentions, that they want more control over their time. And like you said, Rory, it can quickly swallow you, especially in short-term rentals where it's really a 24/7 game. So I think coming at it with intention and reflecting and awareness is so powerful. And so every Sunday, even now, I've been doing this for 3 years. I got this from the One Thing, the book from Jay Papasan, and I go through a 401 and I figure out what I want to focus on for the week, how it all aligns back to my goals, and then it gets on my calendar. And I really try to protect the time that I have with my family, my kids, with the people that I work with, and just make sure that I'm knocking down one domino at a time instead of letting everything kind of hit me all at once and be drinking from a fire hose. I think quickly it can become like that if you don't attack it with the right intentions from, on a week to week basis.
So in terms of a proper intro, Chris is one of the co-founders of Seacoast Vacation Rentals. Seacoast to Summit, I think, is the
Rebrand.
company now. Is that right? The rebrand? We're all rebranding stuff. Chris is also a coach in the Short-Term Rental Secrets Mastermind, and I'll let you explain what that means, because a lot of people don't understand coaching and masterminds and that kind of thing. And you've also just launched a consulting program, which you can get into, called Launchpad Consulting. But again, this is all within the past, say, 5 years, right? If you first launched this in 2018, 2019. So when you first meet people like out and about at, soccer games for your kids or cocktail parties, and people say, "What do you do?" What do you say?
Now I'm changing my identity. It used to be I'm a short-term rental manager, and that was to take me from, being an employed person at Liberty Mutual, which was my job for about 10 years. Now it's being an executive coach and world-class advisor. And so that's been my theme for the last 12 months or so. I'm going to continue down that track. But that's what I'm telling people these days, and that's how I'm identifying, because that's the type of work I want to do, whether it's within my management company and building up leaders within my own team, or working and being a consultant or coach to students that are trying to build up another business, or advising CEOs, like how do they get out of the rat race that maybe they've kind of found themselves to be in, even though they are self-employed.
Well, how difficult was it to say those words and to change kind of the identity, because you're going through this rebranding right now, which is not news to me. I've seen the evolution, but hearing you actually say it, it's a little different from the capacity that I've known you in.
It's still a challenge. I think I'm still crafting the right phrase for it and building confidence for it. I think this year is all about building my craft, honing in on my craft.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm coaching over 100 students within the Short-Term Rental Secrets Mastermind. We've started taking on clients with Launchpad. We can get into that in a bit. And then just for my management company, just keeping that in the back of my mind, the constant theme of I'm no longer an operator. I'm a leader in this business. I'm building up leaders. I'm still trying to craft like the right, pitch there. But within every thing that I do, it comes from that intention instead of what was for 4 years was I'm a short-term rental manager. I'm growing this business. I'm building, taking on more listings, investing, etc. Like my sole focus now is executive coaching.
Mm-hmm. I go back to a couple of years ago when we first met, and some of the words I said back after you gave the presentation that you did was, I'm doing this all on my own. I think I'm doing 85% of it right. I need to be around more people like you saying the words that you say. And you were talking about in-market operations. Like, you weren't talking about executive coaching and everything back then. And I think I'm not alone in a lot of people that happen to own a short-term rental, in just needing to be around other people that also happen to own a short-term rental. And I think it's kind of where it starts. And you see it with students that are coming to the coaching program. I would fathom to say the majority of the people that come in don't have as lofty of a goal that you've laid out right there, or even where my mindset might be today. I even didn't a couple of years ago. We came into it just saying, I need someone to tell me how to log into this and that, and what provider I need to go, figure out to find cleaners, and where do I get discounts on good furnishings, and how do I message my guests and set it up in guest-ear hospitable? Like, that's where most of the people come from, right? I'm not wrong to say that.
No, not at all. I mean, I think the switch that you make, there's two things. And we've talked about how you joined Limitless and started really going into a different level of mindset, right? But the other thing, and it's kind of similar, just more tactical, I think, is leveraging this headspace of who, not how. It's a fantastic book by Dan Sullivan. That book alone, I read it maybe 2022, completely changed the way I think. And it goes to what you just said. Instead of thinking about how you do everything, it's more about, well, who can execute on those items that are probably smarter than you anyways. So let them run with it and just find the who's instead of trying to figure out everything for yourself. Because that's where you really start to expand, is when you can leverage other people's time, the right technologies, sure, processes, all that stuff. But it really comes down to building up, great team members, leaders, etc., so that you can execute on a broader vision than anything you could do by yourself.
Yeah. I did a walkthrough on Monday of a couple properties with my handyman, who's someone that you're also in conversations with. Maybe you've engaged him or not. But he'd keep mentioning, a way to do something relatively simple, clean out a trap in a washing machine and do this and that. And I kept having to either correct the conversation or mentally just say it out loud, be like, well, you mean you could do this, right? Because I don't want to do this stuff anymore. And it's different from where I was a couple of years ago, where Rory, you and I just thought that when the media job ended, I was going to be managing the properties and, putting the cushions away and, supplying them all. And I do those things still, right? I mean, what's the joke, Rory? I could never drive to New Hampshire with an empty car.
No, you can't, or even to the Cape or anywhere. You just fill your car. But,
Yeah.
therein lies an important point. And I've said this a bunch on the podcast, either whether it's in my own business or in the short-term rentals. We've started off by doing absolutely everything ourselves. Absolutely every little thing, we did it ourselves. And part of me has always extolled the virtues of that, saying that by doing it at least for a little while yourself, you understand what goes into the process, and maybe it enlightens you, to how to delegate that process out. My question for Chris is whether or not that is the right mindset to have, or should we starting out from the very beginning, asking who, not how?
I do agree with that headspace. Even today as a CEO, there's a great concept, there's a Japanese term called Kaizen, which is essentially going to the thing, going to where the sausage is made. And you have to continue doing that even when you become a CEO, because you have the 10,000 foot view where maybe some of your team members don't, and you can connect dots and you can help them through process. Like, there's always going to be ways to improve by going to the thing where it's happening. And so I don't think you ever actually stop doing that, but you just do it with a different intention. And so to answer your question, I think there is a lot of merit and value in experiencing it first and then growing out of that role. As long as you have that vision of, okay, well, this is where I'm going, and knowing that I'm not going to be the one that's doing it on a day-to-day basis anymore. I'm still going to come back to that thing, every once in a while to correct the process or to see if there's any efficiencies that can be had. I think that's the perspective I would take, whether you're just starting out or if you're a little bit more seasoned.
Let's talk about Seacoast to Summit. Did I get the rebrand right? Seacoast to Summit. You got some, yeah. This started as a partnership with a friend of yours who's become a friend of ours as well here in the Newburyport area. I believe you started with one or two properties, and he brought a handful into the fold, maybe 10, whatever the numbers were, and you're up to 70 or something properties that you manage. Do I have those numbers right, or am I off base?
Little higher, but yeah, we're
higher. Yeah. Let's talk about the scaling. Like, what are the conversations like at home with your wife when you're like, all right, we're at 20 now. Like, I don't know if I could do this. Or we're at 30 now. Like, oh my God, I need more time for this on the weekends. Like, what is that? What's the internal household conversation like as you continue growing this business beyond maybe what you guessed it was going to be?
Yeah, at home, I mean, as you know from being self-employed, it's just creating very clear alignment about what the goal is for the household. Because that's supposedly, allegedly, what we're all doing this for. Why we're all hustling and working 24/7 is because of some household reason, usually at least. And so you got to create some boundaries there and have some very clear lines of communication. And so that's what my wife, Meg, and I, we would have that conversation continually, especially when I was working a full-time job still. I'd be working full-time job, then working late to work on the business, putting, our first son down, Jackson, and then, back to work. And there wouldn't be a lot of time together, quite frankly. But we had a very clear line of vision in terms of what the goals were. 2022, I left that job at Liberty so I could go full time. The next year, the goal was to get her out of her job, and the following year was to buy the house that we wanted to settle in for a long time. And as long as we knew what that goal was and why we were doing it, it was much easier to then go out and execute on that vision when it came to the business. Well, we're going to jump from 10 to 30 properties next month, which happened in June of 22. This is what I'm going to need in terms of time in order to get that done. And it was an easier conversation because we had that long-term vision in mind.
Wow. So 2022 was a big year for you and for me because that's when you left, I left, and then things started scaling up for you. And I look at our numbers. I've showed them to Rory, at least with our personal properties. And there was a definite inflection point, like literally the month that I left my W-2 job. And we did have a couple things being cooked up that were about to launch. So it's a bit unfair for me to say I left and then boom, things took off. The timing of all these things was coming together around the same time. But that month, that specific month, is when the hockey stick started, right? With the income that we had coming in through short-term rentals. And I don't think it's a perfect coincidence. Like, I think that it was intentional because of the way that we built it up. And then I was kind of getting ready to leave the W-2 world and the media company that I worked with. And then that job just ended. And I was like, boom, we're going all forward. You probably did the same thing around that time. Maybe you had a little more intention to when you decided to leave. But you were already working in short-term rental secrets at the time. Like, you, I believe, were a coach in that program. Talk a little bit about how that's changed your perspective, your life, everything from the early videos when you talk about, Mike Sodrin and this weird guy recording himself talking in a room to like where he is today. Like, what has happened along the way that has impacted you, and your business?
Well, I think, like, if we're talking about Mike specifically, just his ability to think so high level and creatively and know that there are no limits to what this life can hold allows me to fit my own vision within his. And then, follow his footsteps and know it's possible because I'm seeing him do it. What month did you leave in 22?
July 1st, 2022.
July. Okay. So I was a month before that. And the month before that was the first time they had the short-term rental wealth conference in Nashville. So I left my job on a Friday. That June, we were onboarding 20 units. Granted, it was 2 properties and most of them were multis, so a little bit easier than 20 all over the place. But then I also, like, that following Monday, I went to Nashville. Okay, I went to this conference. And he had a talk. One of his keynote speech, the keynote speech was on the fact that, like, you could be limitless in this world and like do not put confines on yourself. And even though I'd heard that story before, it was very inspiring. And he continues to inspire just by being within his sphere. And so seeing him more from this mastermind in 2019, where he only had, a few co-host properties and one, and then he had, over the past 2 or 3 years, he acquired boutique hotels and started continuing growing the mastermind into a multi-hundred student body. And then me being able to support that and pay it forward, it helps me, and I think all of us, just see a path where, like, hey, we can become bigger and have more impact. And there doesn't have to be a limit on how much good or fun we can have along the way.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Rory, am I wrong to say that we didn't really learn this stuff in college? Did you? I certainly didn't.
No, I mean, you learn kind of the substance of what you're going to learn, but how to actually go into practice. I mean, I think the expectation is you go and you work for somebody else, and you either most likely climb up in their business and the structures that they've built, or maybe after a certain period of time, once you've earned it, then you can consider doing something crazy on your own.
Mm-hmm. Chris, if this is any compliment, like I didn't realize that you left. You said Fidelity? You left them. Is that your last employer?
Liberty Mutual.
I'm sorry, Liberty Mutual. Yeah, I didn't realize that you left them like literally 2 months before I met you. Like from day one, I only saw you as to who you are, right? And I guess we all have to remember that a lot of people that we meet only see us as who we are from that day forward. They don't know what we used to be. As hard as it is to shake, and I think that there's probably a lot of people that are listening or watching this that are in that job that are trying to figure out how to redefine themselves. I mean, like, we're recording this in September of 2024, not to date the episode too much, but, Amazon just called all their workers back, right? Like to 5-day employees. And I'm texting some of my friends who work at Amazon. I'm like, how are things going? They're like, we're leaving January 2nd, right? Like, that's the day you have to be compliant. Like they're not happy about this. So I think that we might be in a world where a lot of people are going to once again start figuring out what their next thing is now that there's calls to come back to offices, and now that interest rates are starting to slide down. There might be more activity in the real estate world. Is that what you're seeing coming into the mastermind? I mean, you have better insight into students and the why they want to join these days. Like, is there a different type of person that wants to come in, or is there just kind of an endless supply of people that have a short-term rental that need to know how to operate it better?
There's an endless supply of people out there that need help and that have a strong desire to change. And if you have those things, we can help you. And I think there's operators that come in that have 30, 40 listings that are more established and that need to figure out how to be more efficient and profitable and not feel like they're totally drowning in this business. Then you have other people like myself. The reason I joined was to grow it to the point where I could actually leave my W-2. That's still prevalent. That's still a prevalent avatar, but it's a mix. And it usually falls in two spheres. It's either you want to create more financial independence through short-term rentals. And so you need to grow revenue, grow income, aside from how you've been doing it in the past. Or you've already done that. You've built up this business, but you realize short-term rentals is a 24/7 business. You might not have the right tech or the right people. You're not leading people well. And so the other piece of it, the other big goal that we see people coming in for is to buy back their time. It's usually one of those two things. And in either case, whether through short-term rental secrets or, through consulting, I know that myself or we can help, like you and Rory included in that. We can pay it forward, and we can help a lot of people if they have one of those two goals for this industry.
Yeah, just to give a plug to Short-Term Rental Secrets, which I owe a lot to, and I'm very grateful to be part of that community. I see lots of types of people joining, and I had people reach out to me right after I joined that wanted to learn about who we are and what we did. And I do the same thing when I see people join in a group and maybe they're geographically close to us. Like, I'll try to reach out to them and compare notes. I've had a lot of conversations with people that, maybe they've drifted away after we've had that initial conversation and they don't really follow up on anything. But I've had some that have scaled things up fantastically, names that we know that are in the group. And then talk about experienced operators, the guys from Host Pros, for example, who I met at a conference years ago, Dave Stokely and Mark Bondrak, we've had on this podcast. They're friends of mine at this point. And they joined it after I joined it, but they had 60 properties already, right? But they were probably in that bucket of, we built this business, but like, we don't think, are we doing everything right? And that's where STR Secrets can come in. And then there's also people that are, saying I have one property and I just need to operate it really well. But that's where a company like, Launchpad Consulting comes in too, because I need to learn a little bit more about this, but you're building this up as a way of coaching individual operators, or what's the plan with that?
Yeah, the real focus, if you think about the spectrum of entering in this industry, if you invest in short-term rentals, either you want to hire a manager, so that's where, a company like yours or a company like ours, Seacoast Summit, we can help you there. Full service, we'll take it off your plate. The second thing is, well, I want to self-manage. I want to do it myself, but I don't know how. That's where Launchpad Consulting will make a lot of sense, and we can come back to that. But the third is, okay, I want to invest, or I actually want to create a management company myself for the reasons that we talked about before. And that's where Short-Term Rental Secrets is an excellent solution for you. Now, to come back to Launchpad, the reason people have been coming to us for consulting, and I'm sure the same is true for you guys, is because they have a property up in Sunday River or the White Mountains, and they see the advantage of the tax benefits, but they have to self-manage to acquire those tax benefits. So instead of trying to learn it all by themselves, they pay a 3-month engagement fee, have us build the listing for them, show them the ropes, help them acquire the team members. We provide the education platform in the background for reference. And now they're off and running and operating it with a lot of confidence, because they still want the property to perform. They don't want it to fall on its face just for tax benefits. But we can shortcut that. We can accelerate their success by building a listing for them and providing a lot of that education in the background. So that's where Launchpad, I think, helps solve that problem for those self-managed operators. But if they were to come to us then afterwards and say, I want to keep on going, I want to keep on growing, scaling management, then we would absolutely point them to Short-Term Rental Secrets, because that's the more scaled, solution for those types of folks.
Yeah.
I want to ask about those the self-managed clients a little bit, because we step back and we talked about our why, and we are probably thinking about kind of a large implementation of our roles in the short-term world. For your clients, these kind of one-offs and these small operators, what are their whys? What are the things that you've come across that are motivating people to get into the short-term rental space?
The biggest reason, I think, are the tax benefits. They will see some advantages in cash flow, but usually if that's the case, one property is not going to solve their cash flow needs. But we do find some high W-2 earners that want some of the tax benefits. They get into an asset. Short-term rentals has great tax benefits. If you self-manage, you can do a cost segregation study. You guys know all about that. But they don't have a lot of time to learn this business. And so that's where the consulting is really, really helpful. And their why is usually around the tax side, but it also can be, to help with the cash flow, because of paying a management fee, 20-25% is going to cut into your margins pretty significantly, typically with today's prices and interest rates. So that's one of the biggest reasons why we're seeing a lot of self-managers come to us.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, with Pride Away stays, we've had a lot of conversations with people throughout the year. Obviously with a funnel, you hear from a lot of people, and you eventually sign up some clients at the very bottom of it. But along the way, it's been just a lot of tire kickers and self-managers that are just trying to figure out, well, who are these guys, and what do they do, and can they help us out? We've had questions everywhere from, so wait, can you be the guys that just come and bring the trash to the curb each week? That's what we're looking for. And I'm like, not really. And we've had the, hey, we're looking for some people to fill up our shoulder seasons, but we're good with the summer. We're just going to keep self-managing that. Can you get renters for us from January to March? And I'm like, that's not really what we're planning on doing either. But, we're open to all those conversations. And we're hearing from some people. In fact, the one that I was talking to you about, I referenced earlier in this podcast, was someone that happens to have a fantastic listing, 4.98 on Airbnb, really strong reviews, good listing. It can be updated, but good listing. And I was thinking that they were going to come into the conversation with us, wanting to hold on to all that. And then I was going to have to figure out, I actually I started the conversation beyond where I should have. I was thinking they were going to want us just to self-manage that listing they already had and do whatever else they wanted on the shoulder season. And the conversation was entirely different, right? It was exactly our customer avatar at Pride Away Stays, which is two busy professionals in an urban area that make a lot of money, that maybe have kids or not, that own property that just don't have time for this anymore, despite the fact that they're doing it really well. They don't want to handle it anymore. They don't want to handle the internet questions. They don't want to handle the cleaning questions. They've been doing great, but like they could do better, so we're in discussion with these guys, and I learned that they're renting 110 nights or something a year, and I'm like, well, my personal property, we usually rent about 170, if not more. So there's opportunity right there, and there's opportunity to increase your ADR if you want to do that. And they're like, oh, well, we like our value scores where they are. We don't want to gouge people. I'm like, well, that's going to be a decision you're going to have to make. Like, do you want to like push rate and maybe sacrifice a tenth of a point on value, or what? But that's the ongoing conversation. But had I not said, what's your goal, which is what you told me to say, I wouldn't have known all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So, the lesson there is sometimes you just have to do a lot of listening and sit back. And I think you do a really good job with that. Like, you never seem like you're the first person to speak, but whenever you speak, you always have something astute to say.
I appreciate that. It's interesting how A, disarming it can be when you ask somebody their goals, but then B, you don't have to go and find answers for them. You let the answer come to you, because they're going to peel back the onion, and then you just figure out, okay, what levers in my arsenal of tools here do I have to pull to help this person? And you just come at it from a place of, I'm trying to add value versus I'm trying to earn business. And that can be really powerful in the coaching space, consulting, or management.
So before we learn where everyone can get a hold of you and all your various enterprises, one last question. What's one thing that you wish you knew when you started in all this?
That's a good one. I think if I had known to sign up for a program earlier, and this is not a pitch, but I spent my entire 20s consuming information, listening to podcasts, and then trying to hold myself accountable to take action. Like, it was never going to happen. And then when I joined Short-Term Rental Secrets, I saw a guy that was very similar to me, had worked a corporate job, had read the same books, had done all the conferences, put out, created their vision statement, but he'd actually taken action on it. And that was very, very powerful and motivating and inspiring. And I'm obviously talking about Mike here. If I had joined something like that earlier and had that accountability to go and take action on what I really wanted, I would have moved a lot faster. And I probably would have been in this business for 10 years and not just 5. So for those that are struggling with that concept, I think that's the one thing that I would jump on sooner than later, is find, whether it's a program or not, find that source of accountability that's going to push you to take action and not just sit here and listen to another podcast. Because I think we all have fallen into that trap, but you don't get results by listening to stuff. You get results by going out there and doing something about it.
As we record another podcast, but I couldn't say more. Like, it is this. I mean, Rory, we listened to Bigger Pockets since 2015, right? When we had Dave Meyer on, we realized our profile predated his on that podcast. I think it did, or like by a year or something like that. But we were in that same boat. Like, we were like, hey, we need to take some action. And we finally took some action. And then, like, with the mastermind, I took a lot more action. And, again, this isn't a pitch for anything, but people are cynical and they're not trusting, right? And you have to do your due diligence. And personally, like, I joined because I felt the connection to all you guys, and I liked what you were doing, and you seemed credible, and I liked where you lived and operated. And I just rolled the dice and said, what's the worst that could happen? I'd waste some time and money, but it wasn't going to, bankrupt us. And it worked out great. So, if you're listening to this and you want to work with Chris or me or anyone or none of us and work with somebody entirely different, like, there is the perfect person for you to work with out there, whoever that person is. But, if you don't take the action to do it and have some courage and risk a little bit of money you might lose if you get scammed, then you're always going to be in the same boat, is my opinion.
With that, Chris, where can people get a hold of you if they do want to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram, Facebook, just find me, just look up my name. I think it's a pretty unusual last name, so you should be able to find me pretty quickly. Then you also go to our website, Seacoast to Summit, www.seacoasttosummit.com. That's with a number 2. And yeah, we're on socials. I do a pro tip every Tuesday on how to operate this business, lead it well. And I guess just to come full circle on the who, not how concept, you can ask yourself here, how can I become more accountable to take action? Or you can ask, who's going to help me who's going to hold me accountable? And I think that's the real power of listening to podcasts like this, but it's now on the listener to press pause and really think about that question, ponder it, and go out there and do something about it if they're looking for change.
Yes, 100%. We'll put all that in the show notes. There'll be links to everything so you can easily find us or Chris. Thank you for listening. It's been the Smart Stay Show. See ya.
Thanks, guys.